With the weather turning, it's a great time to head inside, do some inside stuff. And I think you should head on over to Wrightwood 659. Love that space. Love that gallery. It's incredible. And they recently opened up the new exhibit, Scott Burton, Shapeshift. It takes a comprehensive look at artist Scott Burton, who blurred the boundaries between art and design, identity, and public space. And joining us now is curator of Scott Burton Shapeshift, curator Jess Wilcox. Jess, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I'm happy to be here.
Oh my gosh, we're so excited that you are able to join us today. And, to be honest, I was unfamiliar with Scott Burton and his work. But as I was prepping for our conversation, I was just going through some New York Times stuff and all this. I am just thoroughly fascinated by this artist. When did you first encounter his work, and how would you describe it?
Well, that's a really good question. So it's funny because I first encountered his work, like maybe many people, not really knowing it was his work.
Right.
Because he makes public work that functions as seats and benches a lot of times. And I grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and had been sitting on his beds, or on his benches, that are at MIT without knowing it.
Right.
It was only when I went to graduate school and learned about him as an artist that I recognized I sat on that bench.
Yeah, because his work is all over New York, and that's
Chicago as well,
and Chicago too. Yeah, but isn't that how he kind of became known as what people are calling him as a lunch artist?
Yes. A lunchtime artist. And that's also one way that I experienced his work as well when I was, first working in the museum field at MoMA on 7th Avenue, right across the street. There's another public work of his which is a series of tables and benches where most people, just eat lunch outside and don't even know that these are artworks. Which I think is really fascinating. And, one of the stories that I hope that this exhibition tells is the story of how he arrived at artwork that is so subtle and so unassuming, because it wasn't quite always like that. I hope that people will come on over and see the ways that he began in performance art, actually. Moving into sculpture is one of the key things that this exhibition does, which is really exciting.
Jess, how do you think his identity as a queer man informed his artwork?
Very directly. I was privileged enough to go and look into his archives, which are at MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And it's very clear from a lot of the notes that he takes in drafting some of these early performances that he's really, taking from his lived experience as a gay man living in 1960s to 70s, 80s New York, and using that experience for him to examine things like body language, how people interact in the streets. And in his notes, he talks about, and in interviews, he talks about, specifically looking towards poses that he found in the cruising scene when picking up guys at bathhouses. So he was really, really informed by this kind of lived experience, while it might not be totally obvious on the surface, but these subtle kind of social behaviors are really what the work is about.
And I'm sure the AIDS crisis played a role in how he was informed too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's to go without saying. So much of the work is about this idea of distance and proximity, and what a lot of the public works do, the seats are, offer places to rest, which is a generous thing in general. But of course, you think about that moment when so many people in his community are affected by this disease, and the sort of need for a place to rest. But then, this idea of also the fear of contagion around viruses. And I think, this is kind of interesting in a post-COVID moment where people are reminded of that kind of fear of close bodily contact and intimacy, and people became more aware of how close their bodies were, and what his seats offer is, physical contact and touch, that people can sit and interact with these things. So, that's definitely absolutely within the work. It's, as I said, it's informed by these experiences. It's not it doesn't represent those,
Right.
It's his work's abstract. It's non-representational. Some of the chairs and seats resemble bodies in the way that all chairs, have a back and have legs and have arms. So we can make that, I think, as humans, having used furniture our entire lives, we make the sort of connection between the body and the furniture. But it's not like, he's sculpting, sculptures that clearly have heads and arms and legs, but you kind of see it in this abstracted way.
Right. It's looking at the layer, and it's so interesting because you don't, as you were talking, the description about how he blurs the line between public art and just identity and design and all this stuff. You really don't think about the objects that you use. Something simple as a chair. Somebody made that and it's designed it, and there is thought and a process behind everything. Since so much of his work were these giant public works, what is in the exhibit that is happening now at Wrightwood 659?
So, we couldn't take a whole environment.
Here's an entire bridge that we're
Unfortunately, no. But we do have several works that are in the same kind of materials that he uses for a lot of the outdoor works, and which are functional seats and furniture that people can actually sit in, which is, an unusual thing in art museums, and certainly not all of the works are in that kind of condition that they can be sat in. But I think it's a really important aspect of the exhibition that people do get a chance to lie back on a kind of chaise lounge, low to the floor, and just experience a gallery, a museum setting, in a way they wouldn't usually, and look at the architecture differently. But then, what's really exciting, because it hasn't been shown as much in exhibitions of his work, are documentations of early performances, both stage performances as well as more conceptual kind of street actions that he did in the late 60s. And some of those, because they're out in the streets interacting with a public that is not like a paying ticket audience, I think you can really see how he's interested in the different social dynamics in public space that are the same dynamics that, his late public work is dealing with. So hopefully people will be able to make that connection.
So as you were, working and becoming more familiar with Scott Burton's work, what is the biggest takeaway that you had while curating this exhibit?
What was my biggest takeaway? I would say, so much of his work is about spending time and looking closely. So whether he's providing a seat for someone to sort of sit out in the public and look at other people's behavior and interactions on the street, or whether you're looking at a chair that he has designed that looks like a typical Adirondack chair, a sort of outdoor vernacular furniture. But then you look a little closer and you notice some other things about it that maybe it does resemble a body. Well, why was that decision made to tilt the chair backward? And so I think, the takeaway is a certain mode of observation and heightened sensitivity to the world around you is what I think Scott Burton does really well.
Oh my gosh, and I couldn't think of a better message to have these days than to take time and to enjoy rest and to enjoy looking at things from a new perspective and to just see the world through a different lens. Look, again, the weather is getting a little bit more chilly. Perfect time to head inside. So make sure you head over to see Scott Burton Shapeshift. It's now open at Wrightwood 659. The exhibit is running through December 20th. Advance tickets are required, but you can do that and find out more information about all of the different exhibits that are happening over there. Just go to Wrightwood659.org. Jess Wilcox, thank you so much for taking time out today, and thank you so much for your thoughtful care and consideration in putting together this exhibit.
Thank you, Jess.
All right. Thank you for giving me the time.
Of course.